Big twist at the end of this episode of From Everybody. We got another Sara type situation. Everything's going wrong with Fatima here, and it's going to have big ramifications going forward, I think. So this episode today felt like a big teaser episode. We have had all these mysteries set up this season. Fatima, Jasper, the dreams that Tabitha is having, all of these different mysteries, and this episode is yet another episode where we're getting a little bit of information just to tease us along, and I'm ready for some answers. I don't know about you guys, but let's get into this episode and start breaking it down. So this first scene here, we're picking up right where we left off last episode, and Fatima doesn't have a baby, nothing showing up on the ultrasound. And what does that mean? Of course, Fatima's breaking down. Ellis is doing what he can to try to calm her down, but it's just not working. She feels like nobody's believing her, and that's one of the big themes of this episode. We keep circling back to these visions, these hallucinations, so to speak. What is real? What is not? That's a big theme of this episode overall, and pretty much every scene relates to that in some way or form. So that's the big question. What's real, what's not? How can you tell if somebody's crazy or not? We have the example of the worms with Boyd last season, where everybody thought he was hallucinating and it turned out to be real in the end. So when Fatima and Ellis leave, Christy and Boyd have an argument. And Boyd in this scene is starting to yet again show that the cracks are forming in his psyche. And it all really started with the beginning of this season, with the death of Tian Chen and the seeming loss of control, the fact that he's losing people over and over, but I think it's mostly the fact that these monsters are directly taking control away from him. Between that scene and the ambulance scene, he's starting to crack down a little bit. So the way he was acting in previous seasons is not in line with how he's behaving in this scene when he's flying off the handle, and people seem surprised by how he's acting as a result of this. So this is just continuing to track his change over time, that the monsters are starting to get through to him. But Christy has two possibilities here with the Fatima situation. One is that there is something in her that she cannot detect with the machine, so something akin to the worm situation, or two, that she is starting to lose her mind over being in this town for so long. So those are the two possibilities, and neither one is comforting. Both of them are bad. And here we have Jasper. Jasper's not talking, and this is another theme with Henry. He comes in and says, again, it's just a doll. So that's the theme of these visions and hallucinations. And I think even broader, it's more about like the interior world of someone's mind versus the outside world and what everybody else sees. And here we have Elgin doing something nice, and it really is tragic to see because we know that there is no baby, that it isn't going to make Fatima feel better. It's definitely a sad thing to see. And Tilly in this episode, big episode for Tilly, everybody, and I'm really curious to see what everybody thinks about this, because all along we've had our theories. She's a little bit too cheery and nice. There seems to be something sinister about her. The way that she gave her medication directly to Marielle, who used to be an addict, it almost seemed like she knew more than she was letting on about the town, that she knew before coming here about how things were. I don't know if the end of the episode is going to make that a possibility anymore, but maybe, just maybe, we'll have to wait and see. Here Marielle's trying to get through to Fatima, and the fact that Marielle experienced things last season that she can't explain either, trying to get through to her, and it's just not working. Then Ellis comes in, and Fatima asks if he believes her, and that's when she really starts to break down, when she sees that he's questioning her as well. And she talks about how she's been getting angrier and angrier, and we saw that in the meeting with Tabitha. She was one of the most angry people at Tabitha, and it was on one hand understandable, but it did seem a little out of character almost, and it is in fact because of this pregnancy situation, so we can understand where she's coming from there. But of course, her anger erupts at the end of the episode. So here's a really great scene. I love the fog here as well. Just the visuals are really good. Boyd is not his typical stoic self in this scene either. But Donna has a really great point here that she can't have Fatima in the house, in the colony house, because whichever the theories about Fatima, either way, it puts people in the colony house at risk. So they can't stay there. And Boyd realizes that she's 100% right. And it's probably something that if he wasn't personally connected to it, if he wasn't going through this fracturing of his psyche, he might in fact have come up with this on his own. And Donna also brings up Abby in this scene, which I think is another thing that maybe grounds him a little bit. It almost seems like being reminded of a terrible situation that he was in and the fact that he was able to continue on through that. He snaps out of his phase of lashing out a little bit at the mention of her, but the difference is back then he was able to find things in the woods that helped everybody out and was able to create a more stable living situation. So he was able to get through that by having this position of authority and saving people and keeping everybody together. And here now we have Jade and Tabitha. They brought Ethan out here and they are out at the cabins meeting with Jim where the food is, and they need to see where Tabitha's dream happened. And here we have an unexpected pairing here. Julie kind of has a new personality this season because she's gotten heavy into being a stoner at this point in the storyline. She's kind of had this connection with Randall because of what they both experienced last season. And now we pick up with Elgin, and he had this camera, and the ghost kimono lady took a picture of something that wasn't in front of the camera. It led him where to go, and it is this hatch that we saw Jade go into earlier. This is where he saw the dead body crushed down in the closet down there. And we also saw Victor and Miranda and Victor's sister come out of this to begin with. They were hiding in there at some point. So whatever it is, this underground bunker thing is very significant. And here he is investigating it. There's a knock at the door. He pushes these drawers aside and there is a door behind it. So somebody was trapped in there against their own will. Maybe this is where Kimono Lady died. But we got some candles, we got a lantern, and there's a mattress there that was pushed up against the wall. So who knows? I guess we'll find out next week what that means. Again, it's just a little teaser though. And here we have Acosta, the new police officer, and she is now in this episode kind of coming into her own as a character, and she's dealing with the guilt in this first scene. She's at the gravesite of the woman that she shot. And then the next scene is her going into the diner, and she's asking a lot of the questions that people who first show up in the town are going to ask. Such as, this town makes no sense. Why is there a diner here? And then a post office that's actually a police station. And my answer to these things has always been that this is like a world that operates on dream logic. It's almost like manifestation of sorts. It's like mythology plus dreams, and all of these things kind of fuse together, kind of the collective unconscious made into reality. She even says in a later scene with Boyd that these monsters shouldn't exist outside of a nightmare. So again, a product of the mind made into reality, which is kind of how human beings operate. We have ideas and then we make them real. And this is the theme with the interior world, the visions, the hallucinations versus the exterior world. It's also this idea like somebody has to think of doing something, of an invention, of a building, a work of art. Like, we have to conceive of these things and have that vision before we can go into the process of making it a reality. And here we have a scene where Jim is trying to understand Tabitha, and it's almost like repairing their relationship from the previous episode where Jim was just not understanding her thought process. And here he's questioning it from a reasonable perspective, but also trying to be understanding and not just like say, oh, everything's gonna be okay. And Ethan sees this as well, so I think he's almost comforted by this. And here Kenny's trying to give Acosta the pep talk about how everybody needs to adapt to the town. Everybody shows up with all these questions and they're going to be the one that figures it out. They have all this determination, and after a while it becomes normal. This is only natural for the human brain. Once you've been in a situation for so long, you get used to it. It becomes normal. But I think this is another situation where we're actually talking about the real world here in coded language here in this show. Kenny's talking about how every question that you're asking right now is something that everyone has asked, everyone has their theories, everyone has their answers. I think what he's really talking about here is questions of philosophy. What does it mean to be alive? What is the meaning of life? what happens after we die, all these type of questions. How should we operate the world? How should the government be? All of these different things, all these different subjects. These are things that have been discussed and pondered over thousands of years, and we're at a point now where there's such a history of understanding things and all these different philosophies. Pretty unlikely that somebody's going to come up with a whole new philosophy and see things from a whole new perspective. There might be a few nuggets of new ideas around here, but really you're going to be around the same vicinity as some existing philosophies here. So I think that's really what he's talking about. And when he's talking about adapt or die, he is also, I think, talking about the real world. Not the character in the scene, but the writer writing the scene is talking about the real world through the lens of this supernatural horror show that we're watching. And we kind of end the scene talking about Boyd and how Acosta has a beef with him, and she views him as somebody who thinks of himself as the king of the world, and I think she has been sent here by the town to question his authority a little bit. At a time when he's most vulnerable, she is here. And remember, when she first showed up, that was one of the first scenes where Boyd was kind of uncharacteristically lashing out at her, whereas before he was a lot more measured. And this is all as a result of the monsters and how they turned out to be more clever and they're taking control away from him. She is another agent of chaos against his control, and we see that in the next scene with her. And here Bacta comes in and says she wants to start the diner all over again, and Kenny's arc in the past episode has been about trying to find his new place in the world, and I was a bit surprised we didn't see him in the colony house in this episode, but maybe we'll see that later on. But she, I think, is proposing a new concept, a new place for him to fit in, taking over his mother's role, and even in this scene, he's making the tea the way that she used to. So it's definitely him kind of stepping into his parents' footsteps here. And now Elgin finds a dead body in there, and the kimono wearing lady is in there, and we're gonna find something out next episode, I hope. I would love some answers. Come on. I know they're coming. I know they're coming. And here again, another cliffhanger. Victor is going to Sarah's house to figure out the Jasper situation. So here Acosta wants her gun. She doesn't view Boyd's authority as legitimate because she's seen him kind of be a little unhinged and controlling. She doesn't have the full picture where he was the guy who got everybody into a more livable situation, even though Kenny was just telling her about this, about the talismans and all that, and how it used to be, but she didn't see that. Even Kenny didn't see that. So she's just kind of seeing him, how he's acting towards her. And in this scene, she wants her gun, and it honestly makes logical sense why Boyd would take it away. But they come to a compromise where he gives the gun back, but no bullets, at which point it's somewhat useless. But the other point is, I kind of wanted Boyd to say, hey, the guns don't do anything anyway, because the monsters just take the bullets like they're nothing, so it's not really going to help you in the long run. It ends in an uneasy way, where Boyd's like, if you come in here again without my permission, we're going to have problems. And it's almost like she's like, what are you going to do about it? You know, challenging him. So really, Boyd has nothing to back up his authority with. It's just this comforting feeling he used to give to everybody else, this vision of hope that he used to inspire everybody with. But now, if she questions his authority, he doesn't have any tools other than violence to really get her in line. So there's nothing there. And if he were to start inflicting violence upon people, it would crash down everything that gave him authority before, where it's all about protecting people. So I think that's her role this season, and I think it's going to come to a climax by the end. So here's a really touching scene with Henry, where he says he had this momentary thought that he wished he never came here because it was easier when Victor was dead. And that's just, I think, something we can all sympathize with and understand given the extreme situation. So now Tabitha's seeing the rocks, and she's confirming this is, in fact, where the dream took place. But it's also how it feels, which is a subjective thing. That's about the interior world. And now we're talking about free will versus determinism and this concept of destiny and fate. So this is about, what does it mean that she had dreams of this place, that Miranda had dreams and visions of this place as well? And Jade posits here that it was fated, that no matter what choices they made in their life, they were going to end up here regardless. So that's another philosophical question, going back to Kenny's points earlier. these are things that have been debated and argued throughout time, free will versus determinism. And now the only new ideas that are going to come out of that is the discovery of this supernatural place, which I think potentially give our characters an answer to this question. So here Tilly's trying to help Ellis, and she talks about her cancer diagnosis and how she felt afterward and how she got angry. So she's kind of explaining how she felt similarly to Fatima at a certain point. You know, talking about the strange cravings with her. She feels for Fatima because she sees these comparisons between the two of them. And the way she brings up her cancer diagnosis is like, she doesn't really have much to live for at this moment. She's comfortable with that. And she just kind of wants to give purpose to her life in this moment. So this is her trying to do that. And here we see more visions and hallucinations on the part of Fatima. And of course, a lot of these 4 characters have turned out to be kind of real, right? Like Sara was hearing voices, and then Father Khatri found out that some of the things that she was hearing, she had knowledge that she shouldn't have had, so there has to be some sort of reality to these voices. So the question is she crazy, or is it actually a vision from somewhere? And I tend to think that this show is such that there is a truth to it. I don't think that they're just going to have it end up being, oh, it's all fake, it's not real, it's made up. But it was a very spooky image to see her stomach collapsing in, and there was this infection where the IV was coming in. And here Randall is starting to hallucinate and have his own visions, and Boyd is coming in to see Christy. Ellis is already there, and he's starting to take these drugs that he thinks might help, that are like antipsychotic drugs. And I do find it interesting how Boyd is like boxing out Christy and not Ellis here, because Christy's in crutches. It's just a funny image, but he ends up taking her side. So he's trying to be this calming force for Christy, but he's already kind of broken that by lashing out at her in the first scene in this episode. So he's kind of losing control with the relationships that he's built up over time, where he's had this understanding, kind of like fatherly tone towards everybody. And now that that's starting to disintegrate, he's just completely impotent in this scene, I think is the word I would use. Like, he's not having any effect on Christy whatsoever. She's not looking at him. She's ignoring him. And then Ellis is still listening to his father. So Boyd tells him to leave the pills behind. He is Ellis's father, so he does have that sense of authority there. And here outside of the clinic, we have Ellis and Boyd. And Ellis talks about how he's seen both of Christy's theories play out in the real world with his mother, Abby, as well as with the worm situation. So he's seen how bad it can get on both sides. And I guess we'll find out soon which of these nightmares is the real one. It's another touching scene. And here we have Julie and Randall, and they end up back at the place where they were chained up at the end of last season. So I wonder where we'll pick up with them next week. And it got me thinking, man, we haven't seen that dog in a while. It got me thinking of Boyd and the dog he saw right after he got out of here. But anyways, then we get the final scene, and Fatima is about to chow down on the rotted food, and then she doesn't. And I think it's her rejecting what these forces want from her. These forces seem to want her to be eating the rotted food, eating the corpse that she ate, and she's getting more and more angry. But she's trying to reject that because she has this idea now that it's not real. So in the rejecting of her gut instinct here, and Tilly's coming in and trying to help, she says, you're not alone, and then she just lashes out. So there's a question of, is this just Fatima going crazy? Or is this almost like these forces possessing her mind and forcing her to do that because she has these ideas now that it might not be real? So it's a big twist at the end of the episode here. And then Tilly says, you should run. So what is the meaning of that? And she says it right as Ellis shows up. So who is she talking to? Was she talking to Fatima, or was she talking to Ellis? It's hard to say. The eye line looks like she's talking to Fatima, but it could make sense if she's like, Ellis, you gotta run because she's crazy. But I also think that she's saying you gotta run because you're dangerous, in the same way Donna is saying we gotta keep her away from everybody. She's dangerous, you gotta get away from people because maybe you should be alone, even though she started this scene saying, you're not alone, I'm here to help you. Now she's saying you should run. Does that mean that there's something after her? Maybe she's trying to imply that there's these forces that are trying to get into her mind, that are trying to take her over, and she needs to get away from that? Is it more symbolic? So I really wonder what the significance of that is. Definitely let me know your theories in the comment section below. With that, it's been your boy Shogi, and we will be back next week with another new episode of From, and I'm really excited about it. So I hope to hear from you guys in the comments, and with that, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Peace out.